What's going on, guys? It's Coach Steven with 15 Points of Tennis. And I'm guessing your coach has probably told you to get low and bend your knees, to get turned back and accelerate hard through the shot. And that's all really great advice, but it uses a lot of energy at the same time. Now, using a lot of energy is not necessarily a bad thing. The problem is not seeing a direct increase in power in proportion to the amount of energy you're expending. And that's why today we're going to talk about something called contact point. See, you can have picture perfect form or the ability to generate a ton of racket head speed. But without contact point, all that energy is completely wasted. And I see players really get caught in the deadly cycle of swinging harder and harder and harder with diminishing returns. And then players end up resorting to grinding and just conserving energy because hitting hard becomes tiring, unsustainable, and with not a whole lot of payout, right? Now, like most other coaches, I teach following through every single time and finishing your shot on balance. And what this does is it allows the students to bring their shoulder, elbow, and wrist through the ball and snap all these joints through and around, okay? But see, from there, not all the students are able to get the timing right. And I know because I'm not the most coordinated person. For example, I had this one student I was working with, although her technique wasn't terrible and her swing path wasn't bad, she would literally accelerate from racket back all the way to the follow through here. Now, your contact point is literally right here, but her energy was dispersed from here all the way to here. So therefore, she had no contact point because the energy wasn't focused right into the ball, which is a single point on the entire swing. Now, in my online program, I go into this concept much deeper, but remember, guys, your swing works exactly like a whip, right? So your joints are like segments of a whip, which move the tip to create racket head speed and focus all that energy in a single point. Remember, if you're trying to crack a whip, you wouldn't try to crack a whip like this and follow through. See, there's no crack like this. If I want to crack a whip, I'm actually going to swing and then stop and let this tip come around and crack right there, right? Accelerate and then crack, let that thing come around. So that's the first part. The second part is, even if you're cracking the whip, if this tip doesn't make contact and hit the target, well, the other parts of the whip are moving too slow to cause any damage, right? Because the tip is the fastest moving part. If you remember my last video, I talked about the shoulder being a slow joint right here. If you watch the racket tip move, it's kind of slow compared to the wrist, okay? And moving the forearm, and the racket tip is moving much faster. So to get you cracking the whip on time, we're going to use one of my all-time favorite techniques called stop and pop, right? Where we're swinging at the ball and we're literally at contact. We're trying to stop at contact, so there's no follow through. You're going to stop and pop, stopping right here at contact. Okay, it's going to look just like this. Okay, now I have two hands. It's a little bit easier on two hands, so your backhand is going to be a little bit easier than your forehand. We're going to show you the one-handed forehand right after. But guys, one thing to note, because we're actually stopping at contact, we're slowing the racket head down. So you won't be able to get a lot of topspin. Most of your shots are going to come off pretty flat. Now, with this technique, be very, very mindful that you don't, number one, your wrist doesn't flip over the top like this, or you don't break your wrist, okay? You don't break your wrist. So your wrist can go from cocked to neutral. It can't go to broken, right? This is a broken wrist, neutral. So cocked to neutral. When I go from cocked to neutral, I want to make sure I move this tip right here. And one more thing on stop and pop. It's extremely helpful for you to keep everything straight here at contact. I know I do another video, I'll link you to that video, where I talk about aiming properly. A lot of people either do one of two things. Number one is as they hit, they turn their strings at contact like this. See how my strings are turning at contact? Or number two, they just move their whole body, which turns their strings at contact. which makes it extremely hard to aim. I want to be able to keep the strings very straight like this. See how stop and pop, I can keep it very, very straight. Now, so you should, when you stop and pop, you should be able to aim the ball very, very well. And whether I hit flat like this to keep it straight, or whether I hit topspin, see right here, it's always straightens out at impact, which helps me aim. All right. So as a side note, I'll link you to that. Now, getting back to the principle of the whip. Remember, guys, your contact point is where you're on balance and where this tip comes around and snaps. Because again, the tip, that's the fastest part of the swing, where we want all that energy to culminate right here, okay, in the tip. Now, the kinetic chain principles goes as follows. When I hit the ball, I don't want to hit the ball with my body like this, okay? Remember, my body moves before contact, and at contact, the only thing that moves is my hand, right? That's the crack of the whip coming through here. So when we practice stop and pop, because we're stopping and popping, where your body moves here, the arm stops right here. If the arm stops and the body stops, what has to come through? This is the drill that's going to teach you to bring this tip through. Before we go further, here's a one-handed forehand stop and pop. And you're going to see him stop not quite at contact, but a little bit past. And that's because you have so much momentum, especially with the one hand, it's hard to stop right at contact, which is okay. Make sure that wrist, again, does not break and it stays in that strong laid-back position. That's a little early on the timing. Now he's going to make an adjustment right there, and that's perfect. So players who aren't able to get that movement in the tip end up, number one, guiding the ball with their body or guiding the ball with their arms, even if they're accelerating hard, okay? And the first ball I'm going to show you is me sort of guiding the ball, all right? Right, just like that. One more. That's like kind of with the body. That's with the arms. There's not a whole lot of pop on that ball, right? Now I'm just going to do a nice light stop and pop to bring that tip around and get that pop right here. Okay, I was a little bit early. One more. So I got to wait. Right there, just that little bit of pop, right? So once you're able to feel that contact point and get that timing right here with that pop, now I'm going to go to my full swing, and I don't want to lose that pop. Right? See how I kept that same pop with the full swing? A lot of naturals are going to say, they're not going to be thinking about it in the first place, but it's just this feeling off their hands, and look, you know, this movement in the tip, that's why it's very, very subtle, hard for the eye to see. Someone who's really getting a lot of pop in their ball might say, hey, I'm not using any wrist, right? But I guarantee you someone who like locked their wrist and is doing this is not getting any pop. So clearly there is a little wrist motion here, right? It's very, very subtle. My backhand I get a lot of pop, but you don't see me doing all this kind of stuff. All right, so we're going to transition to net, show you how to make this very easy for starters if you're getting started with the stop and pop. Now, I think the volley is the easiest because you have some pace to work with. Okay, it's a little bit harder off a hand feed with no pace. Stop and pop, if you're using pace, it's a little bit easier. Okay, so when we're starting with the volley, again, we're trying to get this movement at the tip. I recommend, if you don't have a very strong forearm, start choked up, okay? Choke up on the racket, take some leverage off the club, and it's going to take some pressure off this muscle, okay? Now, I'm going to start by actually keeping everything still. I'm keeping my shoulders still, elbows still, my hands still, and this allows me to it's just a drill, but this allows me to be able to just move my forearm. Now, careful that this wrist does not, again, flip over like this, or it does not come down and break, okay? We want to actually keep my wrist laid back and move the tip. See, laid back and move the tip. I'm going to isolate and move this muscle, okay, right here. Right here, see? Just stopping at contact, nice and easy. Okay, that's the feeling I want to get on my volley. Like that's power with no arm and choking up. Now I'm going to stop and pop by moving down on the grip. Again, the racket feels a heck of a lot heavier moving the tip. I'm going to keep my arm still, but you want to keep that feeling that we had with the choked up grip. Right here. All right, just stopping right at contact, nice and easy. Right there. One more. Right there. Just stopping right at contact. it's almost impossible to stop right at contact. You might go a little bit past, but again, because we're stopping, that tip is coming around. Now, just like we did on the ground stroke, once I can do this and get the feeling right here with my fine motor skills, now I can add the shoulder back in. See the shoulder swing? Now you don't see the wrist as much. I'm gonna add the shoulder back in and still stop and pop. Okay, right here, right here. Now it's a little bit more of a shoulder volley, right? And that's going to be more my regular volley, especially when it floats. I'm not going to necessarily volley like this in a match. All right. And lastly, if you want to hit the ball really hard, feed me one, then you just simply follow through, right? And like that's your overhead, but that pop is still in the swing at some point. I don't ever lose that pop or start guiding the ball with a locked wrist. Okay, so not just on the volley, I want you to practice this on all your shots. You can start with your serve just like this, and then move back here and just learn to pop that serve, and then hit your full service motion on ground strokes, just about everything, okay?
Can you believe it? So my second camera overheated right as we're doing the demo. It was a hot day. So here it is, the forehand progression. This is the choked up volley with the forearm isolation. Now I move my hand down the grip, still isolating the forearm. Next you're going to see the volley with the shoulder added in. This is how when you see most pros volleys, that's why you don't really notice the wrist too much. There's a lot of movement going on. And here is just everything following through. That's probably too much power for a regular volley. And one thing to note, please choke up when you're working on this with the backhand volley. And when you're working with young kids on the serve, please choke up as well. Again, takes the pressure off the forearm for both of those shots. This is the same progression on the serve. Those last few were when I slid down with the grip. And now I'm going to hit my full service motion and hit it hard with the stop and pop. Again, be careful. It might take a little time to build up the strength to do it. But that stop pop is helping me bring the ball down and get that snap. And eventually we want to get to the point where you never have to think about stop and pop on any of your strokes. Like the student right here, he's hit enough forehands where it's just natural and he can aim it just fine. The problem is I've seen a lot of people who start to take bigger and bigger strokes without the whip effect, essentially, without the pop at the tip. And it's just wasted energy and the swing is completely discombobulated, okay?
So thanks for watching, guys. This was an introductory to stop and pop where it gets you moving the tip. That's really only one benefit. In the next video, we're going to talk about how to get that full-fledged whip effect going. So I look forward to seeing you in the next video. I appreciate you guys, again, liking, subscribing, and your comments below. So thanks so much. We'll see you next time.